You're listening to Design Between the Lines, the only design and home furnishings podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers, industry innovators, and lifetime legends of the home furnishings industry. It's here that I get a chance to sit and chat with the influencers shaping the industry into what it is today. With over 25 years' experience in the home furnishings industry, Caroline Hipple has certainly made her mark in both furniture design and strategic marketing. She is currently the president of Norwalk Furniture and touts an expansive career which has garnered recognition by outlets such as Catalog Success Magazine and Home Magazine. She's been a recipient of the prestigious With It Legacy Award and continues to demonstrate a propensity for leadership and an irrefutable passion for all things color, design, and architecture. Caroline, welcome.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I was so excited to meet you at the With It Wow Awards in Las Vegas just recently, and what a surprise and what a fun thing to get to know you a little bit when we were there. But now I get to know you a little bit better. I look forward to that in the next few minutes. I want to start because I realized in reading your bio that your father was an architect.
Yes,
is that
he
correct?
was.
So let's go back to your youth. Your father being an architect, did that influence your decisions about schools or later on your career choices? I mean, how did that affect you? And maybe tell me a little bit about your growing up with a father who was an architect and in that home. And
Well, Daddy was an architect, and my mom also was a research chemist, and she was only one of only 40 women at Virginia Tech, first class, and the only scientist. And so they are both very progressive. And Daddy, I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, not far up the road, believe it or not.
well, I lived there for a couple of years, so we'll share notes on that.
So there was a modern house on Link Road. That
Yes.
was my father's house.
Outstanding.
And so when I did, in my days at Storehouse, Mitchell Gold was one of our vendors. And he said, there's a house in Lynchburg that I really loved. And I said, that was my house. Because nobody has modern houses in Lynchburg, Virginia. And no bank would finance my father's design. So his father was a contractor. So fortunately, they built the house. And my mom wanted a Vladimir Kagan serpentine sectional, and she couldn't get one in Virginia. So she went to the shop class in 1955 at EC Glass High School and built one. So I grew up with her version of Vladimir's sectional.
Now, I'm guessing you went to EC Glass as well.
Well, I didn't. My dad did, but I went to a small girls' school. And so I learned there that no was not an answer, and that I could do whatever I wanted to, or so I thought. and so the first book that my parents gave me was an Italian Renaissance art book. Wow. The first movie I went to see at 5 was Ben-Hur. So my parents were pushing us a lot and teaching us to see. To see is the major thing I remember is my mother and my father saying, look at that, look at that, look at the color of the bronze leaves in the fall. It's as beautiful as the green in the spring, it's just different. So, and then we would go to Richmond and look at stores. We would look at stores. And there was a design store in the early 60s. And we would go in and examine all the furniture. And so I say to my friends that are parents, I said, be careful what you expose your kids to because they will use it later. So I was a retailer for many years, but my love of textiles and color started in those early days, following my father building projects, following my mother teaching me to see colors and textiles.
Did you travel with the family and do things like that where they taught you further how to observe and look at your surroundings?
Well, in those days, you were generous to say it's 25 years. It's 40 for me in the furniture business, but thank you for saying 25. So in those days in Lynchburg, Virginia, before everyone was flying and traveling so often, where we traveled was at the Travelogues. So we would go to EC Glass High School and see the National Geographic Travelogues.
Oh, wow.
And then my mother would give us these books from National Geographic that came like every month. And you had Peru, and so we learned to travel with books and in travelogues and
You
in
saw
movies.
the world and
So
you
we
read
saw
about the
yes.
world.
Now, I was hungry for the world, and I also say beware for what you wish, because I've been, privileged to be in companies where we were importing from all over the world. So traveling to India, to Denmark, to Italy, to Thailand, to China, all, and then looking at them from an artistic standpoint. So when I went to college, I was deciding between being a biology major or an art history major.
Wow.
And I
That's
went,
two.
two very different.
Yes, they are, yeah.
And I took a few labs and realized I wasn't destined to be in a lab for my life. I like the outside.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so, and I was in love with my art history classes. And the school I went to had one of the only decorative arts programs. And I studied American architecture and furniture. But thinking I was going to go into the business of, I didn't want to be a curator because I wanted it to be more business oriented. I thought I would be in the auction business.
Oh, okay.
And along the way, after I graduated from college, one of my favorite internships was at Ronaldo. We got to live in Ronaldo and study American art
That is
there.
a great.
Just amazing program. But I landed in Georgetown with an expensive rent and no job, went to work for a stockbroker, thinking maybe I'll be a broker instead of being in the art business. But there were no women brokers in that time. And I, who had been taught I could do anything that I put my mind to, that was not an option. And I had a calendar at my desk, and I had tears in my eyes one day saying, someday I'll have a calendar with too much on it. And then again, beware of what you wish, because it comes true.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
a friend, someone I knew who was 2 years ahead of me in school, called to arrange for a furniture delivery with my boss with this funny little one store I just started called This End Up.
Oh.
And I said, I'd love to work part-time. And 23 years later, I was ahead of 250 stores around the country. And there were all these smart women who had no opportunity to manage or lead, that Stuart Brown, my mentor, gave us the opportunity to learn to grow a company of that size. I started at 21. I had 9 stores at 23. Who gives somebody that responsibility?
Tell me a little bit about your impressions about Stuart and how his being a mentor of yours, how that affected you, and how his mentoring kind of came about.
Well, he and his wife Libby were the retail side of the success of This End Up. Libby's brother and his partner Randy Ward were the manufacturers. So together they built this huge company. And Stuart and Libby realized early on we were the first retail furniture chain in regional malls. We were the very first. And that was
remarkable.
those are very expensive rents, and the courage to sign up for that kind of rent and then do it again and again and again. So Stuart was very visionary that way. He also recognized, before I ever heard anyone else say it, that women were furniture customers. So he wanted to hire women to sell to them. Now, I would say if he were sitting here, we were also cheap.
Okay.
So he recognized that he had this ambitious pool of people that traded money for job opportunities, and I would do it all over again, in those early days. But what Stuart and Libby really did was craft this culture of empowering people. They gave us more responsibility than we really thought we could handle, and we met it. So we were proud, and we grew. And then we learned to manage across the country together with shared values, before shared values were a thing.
Yeah.
And then we learned to have honest and constructive criticism and open feedback. So that helped you face your weaknesses and turn them into strengths.
I've got to tell you, and I'm kind of guessing about the years that this occurred, but honestly, I'm pretty certain not many other companies had that going on, which says a lot about you all and about him and her, the whole family, that company that made
And that's
up.
what it was like. It was. We now, all of us, when there were about 5 of us just together last weekend, the further away we get from that experience, the more valuable we realize. And how, for a young woman starting out, that was my foundation. You can't but say thank you, to Stuart, to Life for getting that opportunity. Now, we worked hard. We cried. We managed the delivery trucks. We managed warehouses.
Lots of hats.
We opened stores. We wrote checks. We did payroll. So we did it all. And what I give for GPS and routing deliveries now. But what it did is instilled this sense of you do the right thing when no one's looking. You do the right thing and it works and it works and it works. And then you teach other people to do it. And so and the other thing about this end up, Stuart and Libby sold, and Steve and Randy sold after 10 years to Melville, which owned 16-store specialty retailer, TJ Maxx, Tom McCann, Wilson Swade and Leather, CVS, huge. So
big.
We had to learn to live from an entrepreneurial-led company to the largest specialty retailer in the country, which all had merchant princes from that were very proud, very there was a lot
of little fiefdoms.
And so learning how to take our culture and make it work in something that was so different was a very interesting. I
have to ask this question because you're saying it's interesting, but I'm wondering because what you created was a great culture. Did that have any influence on the other cultures of those other fiefdoms in a positive way?
They bought it because of the culture. They bought it because they saw it. What we learned, and I know now, unless your senior management really understands it and wants to apply it in the little everyday decisions, is very hard. They respected us. They were curious about it, but they would say, how can we do that? How can that be done? So then CVS decided it wanted to become itself, and everybody else was shed. We could either stay with them or leave. And so we decided to buy ourselves with Citicorp Venture Capital. Okay. The same time when they bought all the Masco properties. So that was a big big company. We were a little company. So we then had many years as a management-led buyout with a venture capital firm.
A whole different
thing. So I'm so grateful that I was able to succeed in 3 different ownerships of 1 different company.
I was just kind of thinking, I'm listening to everything that you've done in that period, and you really were kind of working in both design and management at the same time. You're affecting the design, your day-to-day look, overall look of the company as it's exposed to the consumers on many different levels in many different channels, and at the same time, you're also doing all those wonderful management things. So all those hats, hardly you have to duck getting in the door every morning. But how'd you blend that all together and come up for air sometimes?
We just did it. But what I've always, because of my artistic family, both of my sisters are artists as well, I wanted to learn the business because I always knew I had the art inside. So the first 13 years of my career was learning how to open stores, hire people, managing teams, managing bigger. So I had operations as a foundation. And that is why I've been able to be successful, I think, through all sorts of challenges and ups and downs. And I then found a way into managing the art of the company through owning merchandising as a department and then creating product. And early on in this we created a window treatment and bedding line. So we were buying fabrics. I've been betting my pocketbook on fabrics for a long, long time. But the business foundation, I knew I had to earn. And that was really important. And now I've blended the art and science of design for a long time. And I've always known that my reason for being was to bring beautiful things to the world in a business fashion. I knew if I can make it work in business, then I can do a lot of creative things from an art standpoint. Now, I admire the artists that start and make their living as art. I think I was a chicken. I don't think I knew I could do it from a business standpoint. Could I do it just on my own? My hat's off. And I get to work with so many people like that. I design things too, but I really would rather be a incubator and a facilitator of really great design. And that's enough for me.
Well, we just talked a little bit about kind of the design and the management roles and how they kind of blended together and one supporting the other and stuff. Well, tell me a little bit more about, as time rolled on, what was next for Caroline Hipple?
Well, my longtime business partner, Dixon Bartlett, and I found that This and Up was gone. And we spent 6 months looking around the world to say, we've had this amazing experience. Now what do we want to do? And so we did a research project, and we talked to manufacturers, retailers. We went all over the world. And coming back from visiting a manufacturer in Spain, we said, we want to go buy the 30 best leases of This and Up and open a specialty upholstery company that's associated with the manufacturer. So we talked to Norwalk, we talked to J.B. Davis, who we loved at Klausner, and we went to Jerry Bernbach at Rowe. And Jerry said, love your idea, but I just bought Storehouse, and it needs a president. So why don't you come and do what you want to do? And the odd thing is we wanted 40 stores. Storehouse had 40 stores. We knew we needed some critical mass. And then I asked for the P&Ls, and they were a little slow in coming, and they had just bought Storehouse, and it was in a challenge time financially. But because we'd done all this research, we said, we can do this. And we had a job to do to invigorate a venerable brand that after Robert left had gone to, Robert Curry was the founder, and it had not seen the creativity that he had brought to it for some time. Had wonderful people, good real estate, but just needed love and energy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what I learned at Storehouse, I gained great respect for talent, design talent, merchandising talent. And when we discovered lots of things that were happening, like there was an embezzlement ring, there was just all sorts of things that showed that the people hadn't been cared for in a while. And so we had to bring that culture. So we got a chance to reinvent the merchandising at the same time we were bringing a solid foundation of empowering culture to the people. And so I'm so grateful to watch our merchants, and Dixon and I really led a process of trend watch. And we started going to the Maison and Objet in 2000. I think we were. It wasn't like
You're
then.
Kind of the leading edge of doing
there
that.
were not a lot of there was not a lot of English spoken in the halls. Today it's America, but so we started seeing amazing colors and watching trends and then devising a process to bring it home to our buyers and our buying process. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I really saw happen that was so powerful there was uniting the lighting buyer with the textile buyer, with the upholstery buyer, with the case goods under a common vision of trend and color theme and a very organized process of re-merchandising on a regular basis.
And up till then, I'm almost certain, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I don't think that was being done in a lot of other stores, which meant you were really a leader in creating that movement, which frankly should have occurred a long time ago, but thank goodness you had the vision to apply that and make them feel part of the action, I guess.
Well, and we went out. Thank you. But when you're betting your money on this inventory, you want to be right.
Yeah.
So it's a little selfish. And we learned this whole process of art and science, and looking and seeing what was new. Then betting on some of that. I remember an orange, pink, and chocolate stripe that Mitchell Gold put on his Ava chairs for us that first season, and everybody thought we were crazy. We did it to attract attention, but then it sold. So then we learned to watch the ebb and flow of, we're seeing millennial pink, is it gonna sell and when? Yeah. So we started tracking when colors came in and went out. But we didn't rely only on our own resources. Although we have really good observational skills, we brought in Cecil Adams, who is has an amazing eye and experience, and we said we want a neutral party leading our merchants together collaboratively so we can come up with what we're going to do. So we wanted to. Sometimes there's a lot of ego involved. I know you're surprised to hear that.
Really?
But so we wanted to let the egos go and let the joy of the creativity be the winner. And we knew we needed to not have a player with the vested interest of saying that's mine. So we brought in an outside person, and it was miracle work. It really. So anyway, so it united the staff. We were working on empowering them at the same time, and we were seeing results. So, that's pretty fun.
Well, you've covered a lot of areas in this, and I love what you've done, because we talked about the process. With all of these folks that you were bringing in, the energizing of the creativity, the creating of collections, did you have a favorite one? And were
favorite collection?
Yeah, were there one or two that kind of just tanked? As we say,
Well,
there's always
something. There's a fabric we used at this end up, and we call it Volare because it really tanked. And all of us that bet on it, and remember, when we see a dog, we say Volare, and because we know what we mean with that. But what we did at Storehouse that was really innovative is we had our top 5 stores had about 5,000 more feet than anybody else. And we made that a lab. It was called the Studio. So when we first started seeing Belgian Modern, years ago, we're talking 23 or something, every year, those studios were our lab where we could make wild mistakes. Or we could bet big, but we weren't buying for 72 stores at that point. And so we used those labs to work out the kinks of the Volaris or whatever, and whatever floated up from the labs then got to it was the farm team that then got to the major leagues.
Which is a great way to do it. Great way to do it. In incorporating your skills, the themes, I'll bring those back again: art and science, and I am sure. You were mentored as a young person. Have you had the opportunity to mentor other women in the industry as you've progressed up in other leadership roles as you've been growing in your own leadership position in this industry? Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I was on the founding board of With It as well. I know you've talked to Jenna and Laurie, and I was on the founding board of With It, and certainly through that, creating a process there. We really wanted to make sure it was an education, mentoring, and networking organization so that you could see people take board leadership positions and learn to lead outside their companies and then use those skills there. In my own companies, oh my gosh, yes. But the way I have been able to do it is with talented people in the right positions, whether in HR or development or managerial positions, that we learned together what leadership looks like in our culture. And then we taught everyone else. So whether you were working on the warehouse floor or you're in the C-suite, you were working under the same principles of how we treat each other. And we invested heavily in education, communication, and leadership development so that the managers learned how to mentor their employees. And so to me, that's my biggest contribution, is having the intention as the senior leader to create the structure that provides that education. Because we believe that the real energy in a company comes between the manager and the employee. When studies show, when you really want to come to work, your boss, your manager knows you, understands you, is an advocate for you. You believe in what the company stands for, and you have friends at work. Those are really the core things. So we said, what does that mean? What does that look like from a process?
Yeah.
And we wrote a book about it called A Pathway to Profit. And there were 4 of us that were in both This End Up and Storehouse. And it's using the principles that we learned and used to grow This End Up to turn around Storehouse. So we wrote it down as a tribute to our mentor, who was dying just then of lung cancer. But we wrote it as a tribute to
Is
Stuart.
it available?
It is.
How would someone...
Amazon.
Amazon. Okay, great.
So
That's terrific.
I
Thank
call
you.
it the best bedtime reading ever. It's like Ambien. So one chapter,
All right,
it's a pretty
well.
dense business book, but it's full of great nuggets of how do you, it's the intangible gray of people being turned on about their work, and then how do you make that a process that creates it? And it's the design of a business culture, just like having a good process for beautiful design to come forward. It's all about thought and process. And then you put in the talent of the artist that is supported by a process, and that's where the magic happens.
Well, Caroline, let's talk a little bit about what's going on for you today. What are you doing now?
So I have the great privilege of all these lessons we've been talking about. I get to combine building cultures and creating magical product at Norwalk Furniture. And
That's a great company.
it's 102 years old that happened to go away in the recession for 6 weeks. 12 families bought the business to keep the jobs in their community. So people lost their jobs for 6 weeks, and then they got them back 6 weeks later. They hired us to create reinvention strategy, and then merchandising, and then fabric curation.
And they're based in
Norwalk, Ohio. And 2 years ago, I became the president.
Congratulations.
And it's really my privilege because we get to invent what our goal is to have the most productive, beautiful fabric line in our category in upholstery, and to have in our community the best place to work. And we have incredible people, and we have all this experience, and we have this passion about fabrics and frames. And so I get to put all this stuff together that I've been playing with for 25 to 40 years. And so it happens there. And we're just getting ready for our April market. And, it's going to be
Pretty exciting?
very exciting.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, I know you're continuing to trend watch as you developed that skill way back when. What is you notice I'm not using a number.
Right. Thank you very much. 10 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just yesterday. The current trends in the industry. What are you seeing? What are you getting feelings for? What are your other folks in your team kind of telling you these days?
It's I am so excited about where we're going, marrying the availability and the transparency of the internet, podcasts, what we're doing right now, YouTube, with blocking and tackling basic business, manufacturing, retailing, and internet. And I think the wise people are trying to figure out how to use all those tools and put them together for a powerful experience for the end consumer. And so we have 500 dealers across the country and designers that we create educational opportunities for. So together we can say, how do we best use all these tools? Don't be afraid of the internet. Use it. Don't be afraid. Use designers. How do we marry the designer's skill, the retailer's touch point, experience point, and the breadth of offerings that the internet has? The wise people are going to start with the consumer and work back and play in all of those different areas.
So it's really about mastering this communication, all the tools you have now that they didn't exist when we all started in this business. So I'm excited that you all are applying that. I know that feeling the energy in the room at the WOW Awards just a couple of weeks ago, that those tools are very well used by the Revered organization. I was so pleased to be introduced to you and to others and to witness what I witnessed in Las Vegas, and look forward, hopefully, to collaborative efforts going forward between the American Society of Furniture Designers and with it. And speaking of that, we have a number of students and young people who are maybe at this point trying to figure out what career path they really want to go to. I mean, do they want to design the next pen, the next iPhone, or do they want to take skills that they have and maybe apply them, I'm hoping, to this industry? Is there anything that you might give them in the way of advice or direction to kind of bring them into our field of interest, if you would.
You know, it is an amazing time if you're a millennial, and for many reasons. But quick demography: there were 80 million baby boomers, 42 million Gen Xers, and 80 million millennials. During the recession, that's one reason we had a recession, because in our industry, in the housing and home furnishings, there were 30 million less people when they turned 45 and 50 at the major shopping time to buy. And we had an industry established for 80 million people, baby boomers. Well, guess what? So then the Gen Xers didn't come into our industry. So you have the me's that are going to die at some point, and then you have not many Gen Xers to be executives for this big wave of 80 million millennials coming. So I feel like for a young woman or man, like I started out, it's a whole new Wild West of opportunity. So don't be afraid because someone who's 40 said, I would never have gone in the home furnishings industry. It's a different time, and it's an exciting time for all of us. So I would say start out, and then I would say learn business skills. Design is amazing, and you know what your talents are and what your gifts are, but we're in business. So don't ignore a substrate of business skills as a designer. Mm-hmm. And I was just talking to Amy Fleury, who was an editor and now has written a book for press for designers and all of that. And she said, as editors, we sort of disdain the business. She goes, I've learned that it's all about business.
Yes.
So I do think it's true. So you can't forget that we are in the business of making and selling beautiful home furnishings and helping people's houses be beautiful. And the more you do that in an effective way. So learn business, find your passion, find a mentor. And
well, you couldn't have said it better. Mm-hmm. Wow. On that note, let me thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on leadership, on art and science being combined, the mentoring that you've initiated on your own, but what you've witnessed and created in the beginning days, your beginning days in this industry. I really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners today.
It's been so fun.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks.
Design Between the Lines is produced by Element Studio with the American Society of Furniture Designers. We're recorded in High Point, North Carolina. To find videos of these podcasts, be sure to subscribe to the American Society of Furniture Designers YouTube channel. To learn more about ASFD, visit asfd.com. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more industry stories of design between the lines.